Coming up tonight, we head for a perfect day at CocoCay. We get 3 as the sequins and feathers start to fly. And we take a look back at everything that went down during this voyage and how things were on board the Empress of the Seas. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 7, the final day of the CruiseView sailing from on board the Empress of the Seas. Today was Wednesday, October 16th, 2019, and the perfect day. Our location today was the final port of call of this voyage with a stop in Royal Caribbean's brand new private destination, one they've had for a while but completely redone. Perfect day at CocoCay. So we had a very early arrival today. We were not alone. CocoCay rarely has solo trip days, especially when you've got a ship the size of the Empress of the Seas. It's a very large destination to support such a small vessel. So today we were there with the Navigator of the Seas. We arrived very early in the morning. When we were pulling up at 6:35, the Navigator of the Seas was arriving and doing 180 to dock at the pier on the island. And by 7:05, we were doing our own 180 to arrive and dock on the pier as well. Unlike most ports, it's not just a matter of clearing the ship and sending the guests ashore. They actually had to get the island set up, bring supplies over. They've always had to do that with Labadee and other private destinations, but it definitely seemed like it was to a whole nother level with Perfect Day. We did not get cleared until about 8:17. So it was over an hour to get everything shoreside set up to handle the Empress and the Navigator today. Both ships were cleared at once. They arrived at the same time, pretty much stayed in unison, because this evening we also left in unison. Both ships were scheduled to depart at 5 p.m. with a 4:30 all aboard time for everybody. At about 4:56, the captain made an announcement across the ship that everybody was on board. Not a single guest was missing. We're ready to lower our lines and get off to sea. And it had been that way for about 10 minutes that nobody was really coming and everything was pretty much cleaned up on the pier side. On the Navigator side, though, things weren't the same. They had tons of guests late arriving, and you could watch them coming down the pier and backed up in lines trying to get on board the ship. So they were significantly behind schedule, even though both ships arrived at the same time, had the same scheduled departure, and were to leave at the same time. We were much more efficient, and all the guests were on board early to ensure that proper departure time. So by 5 o'clock, pretty much on the dot, the lines started to lower, and we began to get ready to make that final departure of this voyage. As they lowered those lines, they started mainly with the front ones. One of the things with a shared pier is you can't have guests out on that pier while you're untying the lines. It's a dangerous situation if something were to snap or go wrong with it. So they untied the forward lines, we're working on the aft lines, and for a moment it seemed like we were pretty much adrift. We just started drifting away from that pier and out into the water a little bit while the aft of the ship was slowly getting untied from the pier and ready to go. So that was about 5:08 that we started to drift away, and at 5:12 we officially started our engines, got ready to go, and kicked it off with a bit of a horn battle with the Navigator of the Seas as we prepared to make our way out to sea. As we were clear of the pier, looking back, the Navigator of the Seas then started to drop her lines at about 5:15, and by 5:19 she started to leave as well and continued to follow us for quite a while. She was following directly behind us, was incredibly close to us for being at sea when we first left the port. But as we started to get farther away from CocoCay, we picked up speed. She seemed to slow down and slowly started to drift off into the distance behind us, and we eventually lost all sight of her this evening. She was not the only ship we spotted, though. We also had a Norwegian ship that we passed tonight at 7 p.m. Yesterday we passed one as well, the Norwegian Sky, at 11:30 p.m. last night. Not sure if it's the same ship, but it certainly looked like it was at least the same class as the Sky, and it was definitely a Norwegian one based on that logo on the funnel. So it was a perfect day in CocoCay, and that is what the weather was as well. We had a sunrise at 6:37 a.m. right when we were arriving to the port, and it was absolutely incredible. So much vibrant yellow and orange color on that horizon, right over CocoCay, over the Navigator of the Seas docking, creating an absolutely beautiful sight to watch as that sun rose, revealing the perfect day to everybody on board. And then tonight, we had a sunset at 7:53 p.m. I think that was wrong. That was what the compass listed. It seemed like it got pretty dark about 6:45 tonight, so I'm thinking they were off by about an hour. But when it first started to go down, it certainly looked like a very nice sunset. It was hard to tell for sure because it was in front of us, and I was over in the dining room looking aft for the most part of that sunrise. So there wasn't too much I could see of that, unfortunately. And then, with Perfect Day being a beach destination, you want that nice, warm, sunny conditions for everybody to enjoy all those aquatic sports and activities. And today the compass listed partly cloudy conditions. That was what the official forecast said, but we never really saw partly cloudy. It seemed to be mainly sunny the entire day, and it was an absolutely beautiful day. Barely any clouds came over. It was not very humid. It was a nice, comfortable feeling out there today, unlike some of the previous days of sailing. And we had a listed high of 86 degrees, so it was incredibly warm out there to walk around that island and look at everything. But it was absolutely beautiful, and we had a roughly 12-mile-an-hour wind, which was perfect to cool you down across the island. That breeze just kind of flowed through and kept you a little more comfortable under that hot sun that we had today. When we were sailing this morning and tonight, the seas were incredibly calm. According to the captain, we only have about 1.5 foot seas, so not too much that you would even notice or feel out there. Not perfectly smooth, but at least not rough conditions like we saw a couple days ago. So then, moving on to the compass, we were in Perfect Day today, so that of course encompasses a good portion of the compass today. We had that early 7 a.m. arrival, and as I mentioned, we did not get clear to 8:17. I went to breakfast this morning, checked out a comparison between the two ships while they were docked, and it wasn't until about 9 a.m. that I finally did go ashore and head off to CocoCay. So with two ships in port, it was a pretty large number of guests to send ashore. Between the two ships, we had roughly 4,800 guests that were on the island today, not counting any of the crew. If you were to throw them in, you'd probably be getting somewhere between 6,500 and 7,000 guests that were potentially on board enjoying the island's facilities today. And that island was absolutely incredible, incredibly beautiful, in fact. Throughout the island, it did not feel like Labadee at all. I was really expecting it to kind of be an evolution of the Labadee concept, and that was not the case. It was a very unique destination all its own, nothing like we've ever seen before from a private island. The island consists of so many diverse areas, from the wide open entry plaza to the beaches that were calm, quiet, secluded places to just relax and enjoy the sand, to areas where it was just hammocks lounging under palm trees, to the Oasis Lagoon that was filled with party atmosphere, pool bars, tons of music all day long, a lot of excitement going on. And then of course you had the Thrill Waterpark, which was all about checking out those water slides and having some fun throughout the day. So there were so many different areas, and as you traveled around the island, each area had a very different feel and styling to it, and you could definitely feel that throughout the island. It was not just generic, what is the idea of this area, but everything was truly thought through and considered when designing this place. And the flow throughout it was just so easy to get around, to get between different places. It was really kind of hard to even try to get lost because it was just so straightforward to get from one place to another. And the other thing about it was there's so many things to it. When we go to Labadee, you have a couple different food courts, some bathrooms scattered throughout, but on Perfect Day CocoCay, the food destinations are pretty much right there. No matter where you are, you're not far from somewhere that you can go to eat, and you're not far from a bathroom. There are so many different bathrooms, changing rooms, and of course eateries throughout the island that you're always going to be near something that you're looking for. You're never really out searching for too long before you'd run into it naturally. And the nice thing with all those dining venues is they're set up just like the ship. You have special drink sections of each venue, and while the food only operated from about 11:30 till 3 o'clock, the drinks were available the entire time. That was a big issue with Labadee. It was incredibly hot in Labadee, and you'd walk around and couldn't find anything to drink, and even going to the bars, their response was they had to buy it because they only had the bottles of water. They did not have tap water or anything complimentary throughout the entire island outside of those dining periods. Whereas in CocoCay today, as soon as we were cleared, all those dining areas and every one of the dining venues was available, and they had all different kinds of flavored drinks just like on board the ship, completely complimentary and ready to go the entire day, so you could try and keep hydrated, keep cooled down a bit from those hot conditions out there. And in addition to those drinks, several of those drink stations also included soft serve ice cream machines just like on board, so you get that complete shipboard experience on land. So for me, when I got there, took a lap around half the island, checked out the beaches, the harbor area, and then headed to the Oasis Lagoon to check that out. From 9:30 to 11:30, spent 2 hours going around filming every inch of the main island of CocoCay to create a complete ship tour of the entire place. So be sure to check that out. You'll be able to see every inch of this incredible destination, every section, all the different activities and elements that make up the perfect day at CocoCay. By 11:30, all the dining venues on the island were then open and available to serve you. So I spent from 11:30 to 12 checking out all those venues, looking at all the offerings that are available on the island. It was certainly different than we've seen on them in the past. Both CocoCay and Labadee have traditionally done barbecues, include some ribs, hamburgers, hot dogs, pasta salad, pretty basic picnic style barbecue menu. And today on CocoCay, it was completely different than that. There are snack shacks and then of course the main dining venues. And those two main dining venues featured those drinks, the ice cream, and then sections of salad bars, hamburgers, hot dogs. They had entire areas for sandwiches, including Cubans. They had sections dedicated to Mexican food with all different kinds of tacos to it. So there was just a huge variety, and each one of those food courts had two of each station. Each of those stations had multiple iterations of everything included in it. So there's plenty of food and variety, and certainly a little more unusual variety to that food offering, ensuring everybody can find something to eat at those. And in addition to those main food courts, if you want something a little bit quicker, a little more intimate, or just something different away from the beaten path, you could head over to one of the snack shacks. They have their own unique menu of items, some traditional items, some unique and different, and a lot of them first available only on Snack Shack at CocoCay, or classics that return to there. So for me, that is where I chose to eat, something a little bit different than the normal food courts. little more relaxed environment than some of the chaos of the larger food courts. So I first got the Shack Burger, which is unique to the Snack Shack, obviously by the name, and that, as promised by Elvis, was the best burger available on the ship or on the cruise. It was absolutely delicious. It featured a brioche bun, beef patty, American cheese, lettuce, beef stock, tomato, and shack sauce, and it was perfectly cooked. Tasted delicious. That shack sauce adds a nice element of flavor to it, and that is why I also got the Shack Crispy Chicken Sandwich, which is basically the exact same thing with a chicken sandwich instead of a hamburger in it. And that was, in my opinion, actually even a little bit better than that cheeseburger that everybody's been talking about for so long. To go along with those two sandwiches, I also got an order of mozzarella sticks, which were absolutely delicious. Had that pure, true mozzarella flavor to it, and you could really tell that it was not generic cheese, but true mozzarella in those mozzarella sticks. And for dessert, went with a funnel cake, which is only available inside of CocoCay at the Snack Shack. There is no other ship that is serving funnel cake on board. So then after dinner, I headed over to the Thrill Waterpark to film a tour of that entire section of the island. So that'll be included in that complete port tour for CocoCay. Then 2 o'clock, after I finished all those tour recordings, there will not be a walkthrough of CocoCay. Didn't seem like there'd be enough time to get one of those in. So instead, I took the opportunity to spend a bit of time in that water park and check out those slides, see what they were like. Got to the water park about 2:15, left it at 3:45, so only spent about 90 minutes in the water park. But in that short amount of time, I was able to do so many things. There are complimentary lockers available on the island, so you can tuck your stuff into a locker and keep it safe while you're off enjoying the adventures. And while my stuff stayed in the locker, I did go out and try all those slides. There's about 12 slides, tried all of them except a single one of them. So in that water park, there's so many things to do. You've got the giant wave pool in there that was loaded with people. That was a very popular place to hang out. You also had an aquatic jungle gym type area that you could play around, and 2 different areas of slides. One area had a tube slide that you could go down that led out into a pool, along with a large family-style raft that did a half pipe, and of course a set of 4 headfirst racer mat slides that you can go down. There's also then the most famous icon of CocoCay, more popular than the balloon, and that was the large tower for Daredevil's Peak. That tower structure is massive. You don't realize until you're walking up it just how high it is, as those stairs just keep coming as you're headed up. It seems like every time you're coming towards the end, it's just a plateau for more slides to drop off from, and you continue up to it. So it was a very high slide. It took about 15 minutes to get through the line, and that one I did do twice. That slide was incredible. As you're going down, you just keep picking up that speed all the way to the bottom when you shoot out at the end. And then in addition to that main large slide, there are several other ones that go off of that tower. There's one that's a near vertical free fall drop that you just slide right out and go over the end and down the side of the tower to the bottom of the slide. There's also a couple different variants of tube slides and an open slide that you can go on with differing heights and complexities to their layouts. And then there is the drop-in one where you stand on the platform drops out, and you drop right into the slide to continue your journey down to the bottom of the tower. So many different slides in an area, all winding around the tower, giving an incredible experience throughout. Most of them you could not see, so you couldn't take in those views as you're on the slide, but you did get those nice views all the way up the tower as you're walking. So none of those slides really had too long a line. A couple of them you had a little bit of a wait, others you walked straight on. The fact that I got on pretty much every slide except for that family tube slide within just a 90-minute period says a lot about how well the island is able to handle its load. And today we had that 4,800 roughly guest capacity, potentially about 6,000 when you include crew, on the island, and there was nowhere that it really felt crowded. There were plenty of chairs everywhere you looked, plenty of room in the pools, the various venues, and in that water park there's plenty of room on all those rides to handle the demand that was out there today. So one of the things that I saw as I circled the island today was all that construction for the upcoming South Beach expansion. And in addition to that, on some of those back paths, you got some glimpses into the off-limits areas. And one of those actually included an entire nursery of plants. So while most private destinations, the plants just kind of grow freely, they take over an existing island, here everything truly was created. All those plants are constantly monitored and ready to be replaced. They have all those plants growing just in case they need something. So it truly is maintained and managed in every detail, from the smallest thing to like a plant to the construction of water slide, was truly thought out with incredible precision and foresight into what would be needed in the future for this island. And with running water, electricity, all the amenities on the island, it truly could be used for almost anything in the future. You could see the motel style building used to house the current workers. Maybe we'll see a hotel in the future. There's certainly a lot of land left on the other half of the island that has not been developed yet. So, as I mentioned, I left there about 3:45, made it back into the ship by 4 p.m., got to do a little comparison between the Empress and the Navigator some more as we're walking down that pier up to the ship sitting docked there. And as I was walking back to the ship, right in between the two ships, the Empress Seas only boarded from the forward end. Navigator had 3 different spots you could board that ship. As I walked down the pier towards the Empress Seas to load onto the ship, the first alpha call to sailing was called, and in that area, it echoed off the Navigator, back off the Empress, filled the whole space, and for a moment, all the various crew members from Navigator that were standing along the pier started questioning each other on where that was coming from, whether it was their own ship and they needed to react, or coming from our ship and they were fine and sticking to what they were doing. Ultimately, it was on the Empress of the Seas, but it was just kind of funny to see how they reacted the moment they heard potential issue that they needed to handle and take care of, that they immediately jumped on it to find out if it truly was their issue to deal with or not. Once back on board the ship, though, I did get ready for dinner. It was 4 o'clock I got back on, 5:30 dinner, so I got ready for dinner and then headed to that departure because that was a 5 o'clock departure and then right to dinner. Watching that departure, of course, I mentioned before, you got that beautiful sight of not just CocoCay, but you also got to see the adjacent private island. And interestingly, the way that Royal Caribbean designed that pier, it juts out towards the other island, so when all the ships set sail away from the pier, they head right in front of the other island and start to make a turn out to sea. So I'm not sure if that was intentional, just the way that it was determined had to be handled, but it certainly gives a nice little extra boost of advertising to the adjacent island as the ships arrive and depart each day. So then for dinner tonight, it was a very unusual menu. Not the most appealing main courses, unfortunately, and certainly not a menu we typically see on the last night. It included the lobster tail. Usually that's done on second formal night, and for this sailing, for some reason, they decided to stick that on the final day of the voyage, the very last night, and not just the last night, but a port day last night of the voyage. So certainly a busy day with everything going on, getting everything packed and ready to go tomorrow, and then this menu having some of the items people look for every sailing meant that we had to go to the dining room for it. So for me at least, I started out with pairing of starters. I got the Vidalia onion tart as well as some minestrone soup. For my entree, I went with the roasted beef tenderloin, which was very tender and juicy and an absolutely delicious cut of meat there. And for dessert, I went with the classic molten chocolate cake, as well as some strawberry ice cream. Again, last night had to get some of that because it's always delicious in the dining room, and you can't get that anywhere else on the ship. The rest are soft serve. But that molten chocolate cake, it was similar to the other ones, just that thick, dark chocolate. Still not the biggest fan of it, but I always seem to want to give that one a try just in case we get something a little bit different from one of these voyages. In addition to all the food, they also had a special announcement, a speech thanking all the crew for all their hard work from the guests, and introducing a few people, including the fact that it's not just the main dining room, but the Windjammer that is taken care of by the same crew. And all the way up from the Windjammer, we brought down Washi Washi and got a massive cheer from the entire dining room, the biggest reaction of the entire night, just like we saw in the flag parade last night when they were brought out there too. From there I went to the Centrum, right behind me, to check out the If You Know It, Dance It game in the Centrum. Is hosted by Casey. We've seen several games with singing. Oftentimes people do some dancing and mix things into it. Tonight they finally had a game that was focused on dancing. It was basically they'd play a random song again, and as soon as you heard it, if you understood what the dance is for that song, you got up on the Centrum stage and performed the dance. As many people as knew it were able to go up there and participate for every song that was played. So that was 7:45. Immediately went into the Royal Theater then to get seats front and center for tonight's production show, because it's not a headliner. It's the last night of the sailing, and it is our second production show, the one that is in the Sequins and Feathers family of shows, 3. And this covers the entire spectrum of what a showgirl is, from the past, the present, to the future. Thus, the name 3, or Sequins and Feathers, Sequins and Feathers Live, Love, Legs, and now Sequins and Feathers 3. Whichever way you want to look at it, it is 3. That is what it's about and which show number it is. And you can certainly feel that Sequins and Feathers throughout the show. It was very much in line with how Live, Love, Legs worked on board the Ovation of the Seas. It had some incredible moments of a lot of excitement, action going on, large dance sequences, the big headdresses, and then all of a sudden you'll get this nice intimate little scene with just subtle lighting and action, maybe a dancer or two and a singer. Just very calm moments that just interject in between all those high energy moments. And unlike Bahamas, tonight the cast was not overly exhausted and sweating it out like they were the other night. So this was certainly a much more bearable load to perform, and they all had times they were off stage because there were those intimate moments with very few people needed to be involved in on stage at that time. And that show, just like the other one, utilized the entire space. They used the full stage, they used that walking area in front of the stage, and they heavily used those stairs on either side, at one point having a performance directly on those stairs. So they utilized all the space they had with such a small venue. And what's interesting is you don't notice how small it is, you don't notice how small the cast is. When we were on the Jewel of the Seas, one of the first things I noticed was just how small that cast was, how it seemed to impact the quality of the show with just not having that many people on the stage at any given point in time. And that was not the case with these shows. You really didn't pick up on how small the cast was because they were always out there, utilized so heavily, and just doing such an incredible job at the performances. And then they also heavily utilized that video screen in the back wall. It looked absolutely incredible, beautiful, such crisp, clear imagery. They utilized some scenes exactly like Live, Love, Legs, where they had a very showgirl-esque video using some of the same clips even, with a singer off to the side, and that looked incredible. The way the lighting was done, the way the backdrop was used. One point they even turned it to a simple white square screen and used it to kind of cast shadows and add additional elements of effect to those performances that were going on. And it really was interesting to see how they evolved throughout the time. The story naturally introduced different genres, decades, all different styles of music throughout the show. Tried to touch base with everybody in the audience, and it was an incredible show. The performers are just so good at what they do and so precise with all their moves that it just comes off effortless, even though it is a ton of work to pull off these shows. So that was a 9 p.m. show, and then lasted about 50 minutes because it wasn't just the show itself, they then, since it was the final night, followed it up with the entire crew on board. At the end, Elvis came out, started introducing the different areas of the ship, and brought them all on the stage from the back of the theater. And that included not just officers, but members to represent all the different areas in the ship, from the housekeepers to the chefs to the waiters. And at one point, they had to announce him. The biggest name on board, Washi Washi, was announced and brought on stage for this show as well. So that is the second time today that he was announced and received the largest applause and cheers of any time on this sailing. So that was 9 till about 9:50, and then 10:15 was the late night adult comedy with Troy Thurgill, who we saw yesterday had an incredible set, a brand new original one. Tonight's adult comedy was not a 100% new set. It certainly had elements from the old one that I picked up and recognized immediately the moment the joke started. That seemed to account for probably about half the act, if not a little bit more. There was once again a lot of that joking with the crowd, a lot of back and forth banter and harassment going on there that really made it a hilarious show. And at the end, he made some jokes about different nationalities and some accents and stereotypes, and as part of that, he went through and called out the Polynesians and gave a little shout out to Washi Washi, which immediately brought the entire crowd into a cheer, the absolute loudest and most immediate reaction to any joke of the entire show, and really shows just how popular Washi Washi has become on this sailing, that he is brought into everything, recognized. They clearly see how much the guests enjoy him and view him as somebody that makes a major impact on their vacation each time they're on board the Empress of the Seas. I don't know if it is as big on any other ship. I have not seen it considered or utilized in the same manner on any other ship except this one on this sailing. So that was a 10:15 show, lasted till almost 11 o'clock, and then that pretty much was the end of the compass for today and the entire sailing of the Empress of the Seas down to the Western Caribbean for this 7-night voyage. So then we do have one venue tonight. We're going to take a look at one of the most popular venues on board, not for shows, but for eating, and that is the complimentary dining venue on board the Windjammer Marketplace. The first thing most think of with cruising is the food. Most specifically, the large buffets found on board cruise ships. With modern cruise ships, the complimentary dining options can seem endless, each serving a different style for different tastes. On board the Empress of the Seas, though, the options are limited. Guests can have a sit-down meal in the main dining room or a casual meal in the Windjammer Cafe. Located on deck 10 forward of the atrium, the venue can be accessed from either side of the ship. It features a variety of seating options, from counter space to small tables and large tables, all with ample views of the ocean. Directly outside the venue, guests can even carry their food to an area of outdoor tables to enjoy a meal in the fresh air. When talking about a buffet, though, what really matters is the food. Despite her age and the lack of food options on board, the Windjammer on the Empress of the Seas may be the best in the fleet. Turning her disadvantage into a positive, she serves 4 meal periods each day, a traditional breakfast, lunch, and dinner, as well as taking over the duties of serving a late night period. Most importantly, though, she starts the day early with a continental breakfast and fills the gap between each meal with a snack period. This means that the Windjammer is open as much as 20 hours a day without ever closing. Instead, between main meals, one side will close while the food slowly transitions across the venue to clean and prepare for the next period. This leads to a continuously changing lineup of food throughout the day and as the only venue for casual meals, it requires them to change the lineup every day. As a result, the Empress of the Seas has the most variety of any Windjammer in the fleet. Working to change up traditional items like the salad selection and offering a different baked pasta every day, the lineup never gets old. Even traditional staples like the late night offerings serve more variety than any other ship, with not just pizza and sandwiches, but also a variety of unique items each night, such as tacos, nachos, and even special dinner entrees that are kept behind after dinner service. It's not just the food variety that stands out though, as the venue also has 2 complimentary drink areas that each feature several drink fountains with a wide selection of juices and flavored waters available at any time, in addition to teas and coffees. If the 20 hours weren't enough time to get what you want though, the outdoor deck area right off the pool features a 3rd drink area that is accessible 24 hours a day with the same variety of hot and cold drinks. This area also features the ship's lone soft serve ice cream machine that is available most afternoons. So the Windjammer, of course, is somewhere I ate pretty much every day of this sailing, whether it was breakfast, lunch, dinner, afternoon snacks, late night snacks. At some point during every day of this voyage, I was in there getting something to eat, and every time things changed. New foods, different foods, all kinds of variety, and plenty of space. Certainly the best Windjammer in the fleet. And that leads us to the review of this sailing. A look at everything that made it special, what we saw over the past week, and what things may not have been up to par. So for the most part, this was a smooth sailing. No incidents so far. This afternoon's Alpha was the very first one of the entire voyage. And despite my hesitation, my concerns around her size, smallest in the Royal Caribbean fleet, not by a little, but by a lot. And that, of course, led to a lot of concern going in that what will it be to do? Is it too small, too old? And that is certainly not the case. The Empress of the Seas has more personality than any ship in the fleet. She may be the smallest, but she also has the most space per guest in the public areas, in my opinion. As I mentioned the other night, I don't know for sure what the numbers are, what the official statement would be, but it certainly feels like it, and it seems pretty obvious that that is the case, because I never once felt crowded on this entire voyage. Been in the Windjammer so many times, always seem to find seats. When I went to dinner the other night, they even had a portion of the Windjammer blocked off and weren't even utilizing it because there's that much space available. The Bolero's venue, schooner bar, largest ones at sea. There really is just a ton of space on board this vessel, despite the fact that she is the smallest. And a lot of that likely comes from the passenger cabins. They are incredibly tiny, the smallest in the fleet, and you pretty much get used to it after about a day. You stop realizing just how small it is and it just seems normal. But those small cabins mean all that extra space that would be wasted on cabins for a person to see once or twice a day suddenly becomes public space, and now you've got a ton of room for everything. Had this been a modern ship, even if there was open space, they'd probably throw some more chairs in, or they'd throw a planter there. They'd throw something to fill any space they can on the ship. They would certainly never leave it as open for everybody to enjoy that space like they do on board here. And luckily we had good weather the whole time as well, because she is small, a little more sea sensitive, but we had smooth seas. Most of the voyage had about a day of some rougher seas, and then of course we had plenty of sunshine, a little bit of humidity for a while, but certainly just absolutely beautiful weather this entire voyage. A lot of beautiful sunsets and sunrises, especially that one this morning was probably one of the best in the entire voyage. So we've gotten really lucky with those on this sailing. It seems like hit or miss. Some sailings we pretty much see no sunrise or sunsets. Others we see tons of them, and this was certainly in that category of seeing a lot of those sunrises and sunsets. And of course we had that day leaving Cozumel where it looked like there's no way we were going to escape the rain, but we were able to at least hold out for as long as we possibly could, beating out both the Disney and Carnival ships that sailed immediately into those storms. And then even that itinerary was solid. It was not the Cuba we hoped for, not 3 brand new protocols out of 3, but we did get 3/4 of the protocols being new. 3 of the 4 were brand new. Key West, of course, was first time I visited there. An absolutely incredible area, so much activity and unique elements going on there, a lot of cultural stuff going on, very different than continental US, despite the fact that it is a part of Florida and certainly a neat place to visit. Then, of course, Costa Maya, brand new protocol, never been to there either. Custom built for the ships, pretty much a cruise ship on land, an incredible place to see, and one that is developed by a third party that is continuing to develop others throughout the Caribbean and probably the world at this point. And then, of course, Cozumel, the one port we've been to already, but even that port completely rehauled with a brand new set of buildings all around it, new shops, all kinds of new things going on, much different than the last time we were here just 5 years ago. And then it all came down to CocoCay, the best destination in the world, in my opinion. Absolutely incredible. Such a beautiful island. The nature, everything about it was just breathtaking to walk around, enjoy. So much atmosphere, just so much going on to see and do. So many different areas to find something that matches your style of what you're looking for, whether you want to relax, have a party, go sit in a bar and play some trivia even. They had that going on. It was just an absolutely incredible place. Even the kids have an adventure ocean on land that is bigger than the ones on the ship. It was everything on a ship that could not be put on every ship, just thrown on this island, and it worked beautifully. 4,800 people, never looked crowded. I'm sure it could probably handle much more than that because it has to handle an Oasis class ship even with perhaps the Empress of the Seas. So that could be an additional 3,000-4,000 people thrown on there. So if it had to handle much higher capacity, it certainly seems like she is capable of doing that. And the food in CocoCay was incredible, but on board the ship, while the main dining room menus were a little disorienting, it seemed a little more unusual of orderings and pairings than what we've seen in the past. But it did have the best Windjammer in the fleet, offering a huge selection of items and items that vary every single day from day to day and meal to meal. So you could go in there at lunch, come back at dinner, get something completely different, and you could then come back for late night snacks and get something else that was different. You can come to late night snacks every night, get something different. You're not forced into that pepperoni pizza every night or the same sandwich every night. You get variety of different food, changes every single day. So it really was the best late night snacks I've seen. Even Quantum had all night, all day, 24-hour Windjammer when she set sail. But there, it was the traditional Windjammer where the food seemed to repeat consistently. It's always the same foods around there. And when you'd go in the middle of the night, you'd be trying to find some alternate food to eat. So that Windjammer is by far the best, and it's a great example of what more ships should have because it was popular, far more popular than Quantum's middle of the night buffet runs. And it was probably because it wasn't just hamburgers and hot dogs, but a variety of different items, and every day it changed, so you wanted to go in just to see what was going to be available that night because it was always something different. So the Windjammer, only complimentary venue on board. That's the flaw of the Empress of the Seas. Not a whole lot of different dining venues, but that flaw also is the reason she has such variety and the best Windjammer in the fleet, which you can very easily argue is a much better thing to have than a Sorrento's, Cafe Promenade, some of these other venues that serve the same food every single day. So she is certainly an incredible ship with an incredible set of dining venues on board. And that includes in the dining room a brunch on sea days, something not offered throughout the rest of the fleet, giving you that variety of breakfast items and lunch items. So you could sleep in a little bit on those sea days and get a mix of different items. Make one trip really to the dining room and get 2 meals out of it if you want. So that is special to the Empress this season, just like the longer hours of the Windjammer, hopefully something we see on a few more ships. Then the entertainment, always a key part of any cruise. Keep you entertained, keep you interested on those sea days. At night, fill your day with all kinds of things to do. And on board here, there were 2 production shows. Bahamas, absolutely incredible, such high energy, such incredible, powerful dancing. Those performers were exhausted by the end. It was so visible on their faces, the sweat flying off. It really was an exhausted performance for them to put on for the guests. And 3, as I kind of was thinking it would be, it did what I expected. It brought that high-end, highly technical, modern Sequins and Feather performance show straight to the smallest and oldest ship in the fleet, the Empress of the Seas. Been on the Grandeur of the Seas, the Jewel of the Seas. Those shows have nothing on 3. It really felt like a Quantum or Oasis quality show. It is so beautiful with all the technology it uses, so well created and organized, flowed so perfectly throughout the show. It was an incredible show and one that you do not want to miss if you're on board the Empress of the Seas. And hopefully we'll see more shows like this throughout the fleet, because that simple upgrade of a show really made a big difference, and it shouldn't take a whole dry dock to make it happen, because there really weren't many set pieces. For the most part, they used that visual screen lighting and didn't need a whole lot of set pieces to make it happen. And then in addition to the production shows, we also had a series of headliners. A lot of comedians on this sailing, and each one brought a slightly different style, a lot of humor, some new jokes. They were comedians we've seen before, but brought new twists and new elements to each one to keep us entertained. And of course the parties, we had 2 of them on this voyage. The island party up on that pool deck got a decent sized crowd despite the humidity and the poor weather. A lot of energy, excitement, really got people going, and it continued to be talked about for days until the 70s disco party, because the 70s disco party is the Royal Caribbean tradition and held in the Viking Crown Lounge like no party I've seen before. A small, tiny, intimate venue with all that high-end energy and excitement, and really forced the crowds to get involved and build that enjoyment throughout the ship for the evening. But none of those parties would have been possible if it wasn't for the cruise director staff. And this is the smallest, leanest cruise director staff I have ever seen. And it was by far the best cruise director staff overall I've ever seen. Elvis did a great job. So much humor in everything he does. He just naturally exudes humor and comedy in everything he does. And it's always something different and unique. We've seen so many cruise directors so many times repeating the same jokes, the same lines, and that was never the case with him. He's always got something original, something different, something unique and in the moment of what he's talking about, constantly going with whatever's happening around him, and just brings so much humor and natural elements to everything he does. Then of course with these parties, his dance style comes in and he just takes over the show and knows. So he hasn't done as many of the events that I've seen, but the ones he has done, he's done an incredible job for, and that's opened the door for his cast to show off a little bit, because he also has Andy, who proved himself over and over during the sailing just how capable and varied his background and talent can be. He really does seem destined to be a cruise director. He's got the right style, the comedy, between his glasses and his personality, he's got everything to really be the next big cruise director, because he has that persona that can take off and lead to that memorable cruise director that people want to sail for. And he was certainly popular on board this sailing, interacting with all the guests, getting to know everybody, and running just so many shows every single day throughout this voyage. Same with Casey, who had her own style and elements of attitude that brought more humor and fun to everything that she was involved in. Really kept things moving, constantly took charge, and ensured that things actually were accomplished and didn't get too out of control throughout this voyage. Then of course Michael was always there, ready to step in and get things moving along, keep the show running. So 3 people is the entire cruise director's team, along with the cruise director himself. So a very small, lean team, but they kept the whole ship filled with entertainment. There really wasn't less stuff going on than, say, the Grandeur of the Seas, some of the ships with bigger ones, but they each had a lot more that they were involved in than you would normally see a cruise director's team handling for an individual person. And that just goes to show you it doesn't matter how big the team is, how much you throw at them. It is about the individuals themselves, what they're capable of, what they can perform, and how they handle themselves. That really makes all the difference. And this entire team was a top-notch team, probably the best overall cruise director staff that I've experienced on a cruise. We've had individuals that are really good, but this team overall just did an incredible job and filled every day with so many things to see and do. Each night was just jumping back and forth between the Royal Theater, the Centrum, Boleros, with different activities, things to watch and see and do throughout this entire voyage, just keeping everybody active and enjoying it. And she is an older ship, which means technology is not a problem because she doesn't have much of it. She doesn't have a whole lot of technology. It is like returning to the olden days of cruises. No network loophole to do text messaging on board, no menus or compasses on your phone. You have to go all the way to the main dining room every night to see what they're going to serve tomorrow. And that is a little bit of a change from some of the newer, bigger ships we've been on. I'm sure she'll get the Royal app eventually, just like every other ship in the fleet. But for now, it is a bit like going back in time and a nice little change from the current standards and cruise experiences. Because the Empress of the Seas may be smaller, but she has so much more that you get to see and do on board her. That's one of the things I've noticed between the big ships and the small ships. A big ship, they have large events and activities. They have all these intimate little gathering things going on. Things like karaoke or small little events. They don't draw a big crowd. There's more people that attended every karaoke event on this sailing than any of the larger ships would get on an evening. You're basically jumping from production show to events, and you don't get to see and do a whole lot because you have to show to each one of those extra early. You have to be at the production show an hour early to get a good seat. Here, you're constantly walking back and forth. When one thing ends, the next thing starts at the same time, and you can make it there in less than a minute, so you can pull that off. So when you're on these little ships, you actually might do 4 or 5 things a night versus the larger ships where you might only get to 1 or 2 items. So she may be smaller, she should have less to do, but you actually end up doing a whole lot more with these smaller ships. And that's what really makes them special and different, is you get to see and do more. You interact with the staff more. The staff know the guests more. They know who's there. Today we're in CocoCay. We're mixed with another ship, and as you walked around the island, you could still spot some of those crew members that you knew were from our ship. As you went to the dining areas, of course, Washi. He knew every guest from the Empress of the Seas. He was calling them out, greeting them all, and knew they were from his ship and not the Navigator of the Seas. And that's something you get with these small ships. You get more of that personality and just that overall care that you don't get on the larger ships where you're just one of a large group. So, Empress of the Seas, uncertain future. As of today, the Grandeur of the Seas is now leaving the fleet as well. So the smaller ships are going. There's fewer and fewer of them available every year, it seems like. And she is 30 years old. So she's an old ship, but she was supposed to go to Cuba. We are not going to Cuba, and that means her value is a little more in question now. They are luckily going to send her to Bermuda. It's not Cuba. It's not as high demand, but it is 7-night itinerary, similar to what she used to do back when I sailed her in 2002, going to those destinations in Bermuda that the larger ships can't get to. And hopefully that'll draw a little more attention, get a little more demand in there so that she can continue to be a part of this fleet, because these small ships truly do offer something unique that the larger ones don't. And it's not a matter of one's better or worse than the other, but just that they are different styles, and it's nice to have a little bit of that variety and jump between the two different types of cruising elements. So that was a look back over the sailing. We, of course, had this as a 7-night Western Caribbean instead of that Cuba sailing. We went from Miami to Key West, then had that day at sea before we reached Costa Maya, followed by Cozumel, another day at sea, And then today, that perfect day at CocoCay before we arrive at Miami tomorrow morning. Tonight, we are, of course, as I just mentioned, headed to Miami. It is roughly a 125 nautical mile journey from CocoCay to get to Miami. So we are doing about 11 knots. Not as quick as we needed to get to CocoCay, which was about 20, and even not as quick as it took to get down south, which was 15. So this is one of the slowest legs we're taking of this voyage. And it is absolutely beautiful out right now as the weather has been. It's about 82 degrees, so a beautiful night out there. Nearly full moon shining. You can see those stars out there. Calm seas. And tomorrow morning we'll be in Miami. Supposed to pick up the pilot at about 6 a.m. Head in. I'm sure we'll probably turn around before we dock since we were facing out when we boarded. And we have one other ship in port with us. A Carnival Ecstasy will be in port with us as well. I'm not sure if she'll sail past us and turn around or she'll just dock ahead of us, but she is supposed to arrive about an hour after we do. So we'll have one other ship in port with us tomorrow then. So that about ends the sailing of the cruiser for the Empress of the Seas, but we have to look forward. This is the Empress Seas, Royal Caribbean. We have another voyage coming up that takes us to uncharted territory once again. We are headed to Virgin Voyages, the newest cruise line to hit the industry, setting sail next year for the first time ever. Virgin Voyages, of course, the Richard Branson project to bring a new style of cruising to the world. And we'll be setting sail not one but two sailings, a back-to-back 5-night sailing, one sailing visiting Costa Maya just like we did today, and the other going to the Dominican Republic. And that port of call for the Dominican Republic is one that is a sister to Costa Maya, developed by the same company. So it'll be interesting to see what that port's like, if it's on the same scale or slightly different. And with each of those sailings, they'll of course also make a stop at the Bimini Beach Club, which is going to be the private destination for Virgin Voyages on all of their sailings, with a unique element including a nightly bonfire event held right on the beach for guests to enjoy. So that'll be next year, Virgin Voyages, something completely new and different than we've ever seen on the CruiseView, so be sure to come check out that series. There'll be a ton of content on that one. It's an entirely new ship, new class, new cruise line, new concept. So we'll have a lot to talk about, a lot to see. There'll be a lot of venue tours, ship tours, complete ship tour video out there as well. So check out all that content next year, as well as all the content from this Empress of the Sea sailings, all those arrivals and departures, and all the tour videos that are available for the Empress of the Seas. So for now, I'm Derek Cohn. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the Empress of the Seas, my first Royal Caribbean ship, and now the latest Royal Caribbean ship. But for now, that is the end of this sailing and this series. So stay tuned for those links and check out the rest of the content.